thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is a session to talk about how can health interoperability standards enable health data exchange and availability across systems. And we have an outstanding panel that going to discuss this topic. And I'll introduce those, and I'll give a few introductory comments, and then we'll just jump into questions. And the goal is to have some time for audience questions as well towards the end. So to begin the introductions, on remotely participating is Dr. Sylvia Thun. She's the director of the facility eHealth and Interoperability at Berlin Institute of Health, and which is a part of Charité Medical University in Berlin, and she's a professor there as well. She's also been appointed as the chief advisor on digitalization of hospitals and on standardization of medical data to the German Federal Ministry of Health. So thank you, Sylvia, for joining us. Next, and if we could have the folks, join us on the stage. We have Naveen Rajkumar. Naveen is a dentist and a health IT researcher working at the Berlin Institute of Health at Charité Medical University in Berlin. He's a research fellow. He's responsible for the LOINC team and submissions from that team from the digital medicine and interoperability team. He's got a lot of practical knowledge on requesting LOINC codes and getting standard codes for the 50 patient-reported outcome measures that they've been working on. And then from previous sessions, need no introduction per se, but we also have Dr. Jan Kimpen, who's running a marathon here in terms of sessions, and so we appreciate your endurance and your skill. Again, Jan is the Chief Medical Officer of Royal Philips. He leads a team of over 300 associates with medical and clinical backgrounds. He oversees the company's clinical innovation and strategy across each of its business clusters and the markets they serve. Prior to joining Philips, Jan served as the CEO of the University Medical Center Utrecht, and before becoming CEO at the university, Jan worked as a professor and chair of pediatrics. So wonderful to have those folks here. Just a little bit of an introduction. I became involved in ICHOM, I think four or 5 years ago. And the way that happened is that there was ongoing development of the measure sets, standardized measure sets. Those sets primarily, though, were recorded as questions or as data elements that were narrative text. People would put them into questionnaires, other things. And what people were discovering is that there was a challenge in getting those questionnaires filled out, getting that information into a digital form, and people started thinking about, could we integrate more tightly with electronic data that already exists, either in EHRs or in other kinds of electronic systems, so that the burden of collecting the data that drives the measures and the evaluation could happen more naturally. And so there was a desire to try and work towards an interoperable solution where the data could be collected as part of a clinical workflow. It could be represented in a standard form using now FHIR as a structure and using standard coded terminologies like LOINC and SNOMED and other terminologies to create a truly standardized representation of the data. And so that's how I first got involved. My own experience has been in standards and how you represent medical information in a coded and structured way so that computers can operate on it algorithmically, either for analytics or for direct decision support or advanced decision support, all of those kind of things. So a couple of things. One thing I'm excited about, just want to make people aware of, just recently there's been a new collaborative agreement signed between SNOMED International and Regenstrief, where the LOINC terminology is maintained, for a much closer relationship in distribution of LOINC codes in a SNOMED extension, which will make some people's lives a lot easier because they can deal with sort of one integrated representation of both LOINC code kinds of codes and SNOMED kind of codes. And we won't get into the details of that too much. But that's, I think, a very exciting development, and I wanted to just make people aware of that if that's something that you're involved in. So the other thing that I wanted to mention off the top is getting involved in interoperability is a marathon, not a 100-meter sprint. It is something that we're going to work on for years, and we're going to ever improve and approach closer to perfection. Probably never arrive there, but I think we can provide value along the way. And so with that sort of background, I think I'd jump in and turn first to you, Jan, to maybe paint a bigger picture of why interoperability is important, and especially share with us some of the issues that you've seen and know about from your experience at Royal Philips.
Thanks, Stan. If you want to look at the why first, I feel you have to start with the people that are using the digital world. And I mentioned it already today. Every year we do a broad survey, a global survey, where we try to understand how people in different countries in the world look at the digitization of healthcare. And the last edition of this Future Health Index, we asked more than 3,000 leaders in healthcare, CEOs, CIOs, department heads. And what they said is 50% of them cited that they had to manage continuously siloed data. 23% said they had infrastructure limitations. 21% said they had cybersecurity issues, and 41% of the whole group said that data as a whole was more of a burden than of an asset. So if you hear that, it seems that we have to create an adequate infrastructure, an adequate data infrastructure, rather than investing in bricks and mortar, investing in digital, in IT. An infrastructure that should protect the continuous flow of data, and that should help these leaders in healthcare, but also the healthcare professionals themselves and the patients, to get to better healthcare with better health outcomes. On top of that, it should be secure, and that cannot be overestimated. If you look at the last report of the FBI, the 2021 Internet Crime Report of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, it showed that healthcare suffers the most of cyber attacks and ransomware attacks, more than any other vital infrastructure in the US. And that makes you think that if you are building this infrastructure, it needs to do two things. It needs to help you get to better health outcomes for patients, for doctors, for nurses, for the hospital. But at the same time, it needs to be secure and safe. Otherwise, it will lose all the trust of everybody involved. Now, one of these aspects, of course, is interoperability. If you cannot make all the applications in that digital world interoperable, there is many, many, many chances for glitches, for cybersecurity threats, for people that come in, that hack the whole system. So, and that seems to be missing. Now, this interoperability, and we will talk about that more going forward. Now, what Philips does in it, and then I stop this answer on your why question, is we are convinced that everybody needs to play its role. It's a collaborative thing. Hospitals, consumers of healthcare, doctors, companies, governments have to play with it and have to play together. Now, what we as a company do, we are participating in designing the interoperability standards for the future. For example, we are a member of the chapter on cybersecurity of the US Department of HSS. We also support the interoperability concept in major forums, as the World Economic Forum, for example. And we built it in our proposition. So we are not there yet, but it is our goal to make everything digital that we bring to the market interoperable with anything else. And our Health Suite interoperability suite is at this point in time considered to be in the top 3 of the peers in this area. So I hope this illustrates a little bit the why of the whole story, and then we can go further into the details following your questions.
Wonderful. That provides great context. Turn now to you, Naveen. You're sort of on the technical front lines of this in a sense, really trying to implement ICHOM and patient-reported outcomes, and using the standards. And maybe you could describe more about what that's like, where you're seeing successes, what the challenges are. Just give us some perspective on what the work looks like in the real world.
Yeah, so we at Charité, we are making everything interoperable with health data, of course. So there are a few projects with us which which comes to us to make the prompts interoperable. So some of them use ICHOM sets, and some of them use more prompts questionnaires, and we try to make every other questionnaire interoperable, the use of LOINC panels and FHIR questionnaires. So that's what we do, and there are a lot of challenges. We at present are not using the regular data that's been collected from the hospital, because there are a lot of, again, interoperability issues. But we are making project-specific data interoperable. So there are projects on orthopedics, there are projects on COVID, and prompts related to that are used in those projects, and we are making the prompts questionnaires interoperable within the projects.
Excellent. And maybe ask a leading question a little bit. Similar situation when I was working at Intermountain Healthcare. It seemed like there was always something we needed from LOINC, or from SNOMED to get a new code. What's been your experience in getting new codes and requesting new codes, and how long does that process take?
Yeah, LOINC has been really favorable to us, and at the minimum for a normal code, I would say it takes about 6 months for the turn back time, and LOINC really helped us in the COVID times. They gave us codes within a couple of days, and that was really helpful for us.
Yeah. So my thought on that, because I've had the same experience, and I'm heavily involved in LOINC, it's frustrating because you're trying to make a real application, trying to make real use. You want to do it in a standard way, but you can't go back and say, well, stop programming for 6 months while we get a new code. And so what happens is people, make a temporary code of some kind, make a workaround while you're waiting for that code. And it's frustrating to me because the better funding for both LOINC and SNOMED would reduce that time dramatically. And the amount of money we're talking about is a few $1,000,000, which is not even visible as dust on the expenses that we're placing other places. So it's, you know, it's a frustration for me that we don't make that small investment that would really decrease that time and increase the usability of those terminologies. So that's just me whining, so I apologize for that. Sylvia, welcome. Glad to have you. I'd like you to just talk about what you think is most important, but especially with an emphasis on what's happening in Europe, and maybe on a broader scale. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, we all want to collaborate, and we have this new European health data space that likes to give us the chance to have our EHRs here in Europe interoperable. And it's a fairly old project. I don't know, Stan, if you remember EPSOS project, and now it's the International Patient Summary. And in my thoughts, it's I think that we will have prompts within the EHR as well in the future. So this is rather a political area, but we have many projects here in Europe going on, especially on oncology and COVID-19, as Naveen already said, and one special project that is an observatory project just for prompts here with 3 use cases. It's like diabetes, oncology, and something else. So we try to make prompts interoperable, and we try to collaborate here. And as you all know, we have many languages in Europe, at least 24. So we have to be semantically precise. So that is something, yeah, that we learned from EPSOS, our EHR 15 years ago, that we have, so that we made a very precise specification, and we had to translate everything in 24 languages. And yeah, we all know that especially those questions that you have and the answers could be misunderstood if the translation is not correct. So this is a huge effort here that we are doing, and it's much better with LOINC terms, because you get an ID, you have a semantic meaning behind the ID, and you have answers, and then you can translate it. And it should not be made by the vendor, the software vendor, but by the governments. So we put it on this stage, or on the level of the government, and our government helps us here, the former DIMDI Institute, which is responsible for the ICD 10 and 11 as well, and they translate us the prompts, and yeah, SNOMED, LOINC, and so on, together with our experts.
Thank you. I want to focus on a particular aspect of interoperability and really drill in just a little bit about semantic interoperability and interoperability. Just to give a little personal insight, you know, I'm given COVID and the fact that we started working from home. You know, I've been working from home, and so, you know, my family members hear me on conference calls, and they say it reminds them of a cartoon where, you know, it's showing a conversation from a dog's point of view. And the dog's point of view, you know, the conversation goes yap, 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 Bowser, yap, yap, you know, they hear their name, or food, and, you know, and that's what, and what they hear from me is yap, 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 interoperability, yap, 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 interoperability. But interoperability, in a sense, is we use the word, and I don't know that we're always using it in a consistent way, or distinguishing a level of interoperability from semantic interoperability. And so Sylvia was talking about, semantic interoperability and the challenges of translation and other things. But semantic interoperability, at least as I understand it and use the term, is that you could substitute plug and play. In other words, if we're truly interoperable, it would be like buying tires from your car. You can buy tires from anybody because they're standard tire sizes. And the same with music that you download from the internet. You can download because there have been standards about how music and audio tracks are represented so that they can be played by anybody's device. The situation we're in today, and the reason that I make that distinction, is that we have some excellent standards. We have FHIR, we have LOINC, we have ICHOM, we have LOINC and SNOMED, et cetera. Given those standards, however, every single data element can still be represented in more than one way. And I would just give an example. If you follow the FHIR standard, you have an observation resource, which is really a name-value pair representation of data. And what you do is you have a code that represents sort of what you're measuring, and then you have the actual value or the outcome of that measurement or evaluation. So in making a representation, for instance, to represent blood pressure, what developers are supposed to do to be interoperable is use FHIR, use the FHIR resource. They're supposed to choose a LOINC code to represent that systolic blood pressure measurement, and then you'll have the actual value, the number of 120 or 130 millimeters of mercury, et cetera. But if you're the developer and you actually go out and look in LOINC, type in blood pressure as a search term, you'll get back over 500 representations related to blood pressure. Now, that's not a failing of LOINC. It's representing reality, if you will, because those 500 things would be broken down, obviously, by systolic and diastolic and mean and those kind of things, or they could be average blood pressures over time. But then the more critical thing is that the blood pressure could have been taken when the patient was standing or sitting. It could be taken in the left arm or the right arm. It could be done with an indwelling catheter, those kind of things. And so somebody who's developing an application and they want it to be truly interoperable actually has a difficult choice to know which LOINC code to use in that circumstance. And the answer to that from FHIR is to make FHIR profiles that show for a particular use case how that information could be done. The challenge with making profiles is sort of everybody's making their own profile, and so you don't end up with sort of one preferred way for people to talk about that. And so that's a long background. I'm sorry for being so long-winded, but Jan, I'll turn back to you. Are you guys working at trying to be plug-and-play interoperable, or just good interoperable, or and what challenges are you seeing in trying to do that?
Yeah, I get excited about interoperability if I look at what it can do if you can manage it well. And you will apologize, or you will excuse me that I use an example from our own company. We have our HealthSuite Digital platform, which is a cloud-based open platform where we can pull in data from wherever they are. We have APIs for all the common EMRs, lab data, also wearables, Internet of Things. Everything can be pulled onto the platform, being stored there, being analyzed there, and made to use for treating patients in certain disease areas. And when it gets really exciting is when you can prove that it works. And one area where we have proven that it works is an EICU, which is an electronic intensive care unit, which is in sort of parallel with the real intensive care unit, where a nurse or a doctor, an anesthesiologist, intensivist is sitting in a console. That console can literally be at the other side of the world, or in the same hospital, or in another hospital or nearby, monitoring patients in that ICU, 30, 40 patients at the same time, enabled by artificial intelligence to make sure which patient do predictive analysis, which patients need care first, now, and which kind of care. Next to or on top of what the human beings are doing in the room itself. And if you can make that work, and that is interoperability end to end, because the data that the platform is using in order to inform these doctors in these consoles, or the nurses in these consoles, come from everywhere. Proprietary data as well as non-proprietary data. And we have shown if you are using an EICU on top of or next of or partially instead of your real ICU, you can improve patient outcomes. Length of stay goes down, and the mortality in a few hospitals that we have studied is 16% down versus a classical ICU. And you could save money. We did a nice study in one of the big hospitals, and we looked at claims for malpractice that came from the ICU because of wrong decisions, wrong diagnosis, and whatever. And we could bring the costs for malpractice suits in that hospital down from $6 million a year to $400,000 a year, just by using everything in an interoperable way to give better care to these patients so that there was no reason to complain about everything. So that is what excites me. You know, I don't understand all the LOINC and SNOMED terminology, but I know if you can make it work, how valuable it is.
It's a developed taste, that's LOINC and SNOMED stuff. So, Naveen, what are your thoughts about semantic interoperability and your ability to achieve that?
Yeah, semantic interoperability is really, I would say, the core of interoperability. You know, we have to avoid ambiguous meanings and to be very much sure of what we convey or what the patient conveys to us. So, LOINC does a really good job of having us the whole, providing us codes for whole of the questionnaires, not just codes for the name of the questionnaire and the score, but for every data point in the of the questionnaire. So it is a LOINC, it's called LOINC panel, and of course we as value-based healthcare and people who analyze data need every other data point of the questionnaire, not just the code for the assessment and the score. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So before we open up for audience questions, Sylvia, other thoughts that have come to your mind that you'd like to emphasize with the audience about interoperability?
Right now I'm here in Dubai. That is the reason that I cannot join you. I'm sorry for that. And we talked together about interoperability of curricula, so that we have to learn these IT standards, and doctors and healthcare workers should learn in digitalization. And digitalization means for us not only AI and all these rocket science things, but how to produce fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And especially here in this case, it is important that it is reusable because we take it into registers and our scientists have to work with this data, and they want to share data all over the globe. And I think this is one really big issue, and we should always have in mind when we document data that this data flows from one system to another system, sure, in a very secure way and anonymized, but we have to work with data, and our vendors need data to provide to us better technical support.
No, excellent points. Well, let's turn now. We've got a few minutes left. I hope, if the clock is right. Are there any questions from the audience that we could address? Yes, here in front. We need to get you a microphone here first.
Thank you so much. Talking about interoperability, I'm Silvana Arenillas, I come from Chile. In the Chilean situation, the Ministry of Health or the public system has different platforms. So it's difficult to have one single registry because there are different platforms and are not connected. So if I were the Ministry of Health and ask you as an expert, how I can start influencing other hospitals to start using one single platform, or how I can build this one single registry?
Yeah. You guys want to take that? You want me to?
I can tell you how we do it here at Charity and within our 34 university hospitals. We build health data platforms and ETL processes, so we get and fetch the data out of our more than 100 systems, and then harmonize the data, and then we are working on our own health data platforms, and you can, then if it's FHIR, you can just do queries, FHIR queries or ARC queries upon this data.
I think also the question was addressed this morning in the plenary panel, if I'm right, that a government can probably not tell you to use a certain platform to make it mandatory, but it can put criteria on interoperability on everybody that comes with a digital solution. For example, an EMR, you can, as a government, say, if you want to sell an EMR here in Chile or wherever in the US, it needs to comply with certain interoperability standards so that everybody can use it and can connect it to other things. So that is, I think, what a government can do. They cannot force you on a platform one way or the other, but they can put criteria on interoperability on all the digital solutions that are sold in that market, if I'm right.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And I think the thing that comes to my mind about that is it would be a wrong path, I think, if we were actually trying to force architecture within a given product. To dictate, for instance, whether you use a relational database or a cache database or an object-oriented database. That would be wrong, because that's going to stifle innovation and creation. The standards are meant when you're moving data between a given architecture and somebody else's architecture, and that's where you really want people to adhere to standards, and you want the standards to be flexible so that regardless of your internal representation, you can communicate to others in a semantically meaningful way. And so that's, I think, a point to emphasize there. Maybe time for one more question. Anybody? Oh.
There's two.
It's clustered at one table here. Oh, no. There we go.
Thank you. It's follow-up, so hopefully it will be quick. To the point just made around the influencing side of not governments mandating, but setting better tools for collaboration or criteria for interoperability, I'm just wondering who you feel is best placed, or which groups are best placed to really drive that change? Is it the institutions? Is it industry? Is it all of us standing arm in arm?
So I have strong feelings about that, but you know, my own feeling is that you can have standards. In the end, the power resides, if you will, in the people who are purchasing and using systems. So it could be providers, or it could be the people who are paying for them. But I see that a couple of principles that I would say. I think it needs to be led by the people who are actually using the systems in the real world. But it has to be open. There are lots of companies that are doing things, and they're interoperable with themselves, but not across platforms. And we need to do it in an open way so that it actually makes business sense to people, and there's not a cost barrier or a copyright problem or another issue that prevents people from collaborating together to make a solution. So that's maybe too vague, but I'd be glad to talk some more about that. I think there's some options out there of things that we can do, but I think it has to start with the people who are actually using the systems. Anybody want to provide a counterpoint to that, or?
But we still need politics and the government. My story is that I met Claire McDonald about 15 years ago, and we decided to bring Loing to Germany and to translate like a huge value set of Loing for our vendors, and they didn't implement it at all. So now we are forcing them since 1 year, and now data gets really fair, so they use the Loing terms. So you need pressure from the society and from politics as well.
Well, one final thought. Our time is almost up. You know, I think we're in a very interesting place in the history of the world. I liken it to the time when the printing press was invented. Prior to the printing press, knowledge was transmitted by people transcribing data, transcribing letters and characters manually. And then we had the printing press, and we could create thousands of pages a day using the printing press. We now have the technology, if we apply it, to represent knowledge in a computable form. And if we do that and we make it semantically interoperable, we can change the paradigm that we have today. Today, the paradigm is, you know, people do research, they have experience, they collect that information, and we teach it in medical schools, we put it in textbooks, and then physicians, clinicians, nurses read that information, and when a patient comes, they try and apply that knowledge that they've gained to that patient. And what we've seen is that's an imperfect process. You can't make people be perfect information processors. We're now at a point where instead of taking that knowledge and trying to put it into the human mind and make them remember all of the details and sophistication and complexity of the information, you can put it into an algorithm, and if it's done openly or even in a shared way, that algorithm now becomes a repository of knowledge, and you can execute that knowledge because you can download it to a computer and use it in your clinic, and it can be aware of patients that are being seen and know when the application, when that particular decision support application should be applied, and it will be very accurate, and it will be ever increasing, and it will be an asset to the world, to the community, to everybody in the world, because we can provide better health care. And so it's that vision, if you will, that you know, otherwise I would be doing other things. It's the foundation that can really allow the accurate and sharing measurement of outcomes, but also the ability to ultimately share knowledge, which becomes an asset to the community and to the world. So I'm just enthusiastic about it. I'm over time, so I apologize. But thank you so much for your participation.